Okay guys, let's start with case number 1, AngularJS template injection and scope hacking. In this case and in the upcoming 2 cases, I'm going to focus on AngularJS, which is a very popular JavaScript framework that implements MVC. It's really popular. And the more you know about different technologies, the more bugs you can find, and the more bugs you can find, the more money you can earn, and this kind of stuff, right? And in this case and in the upcoming 2 cases, I'm gonna focus on this very popular JavaScript framework that is really frequently used. And if you have never played with this stuff, then you have no chances to spot very nice and interesting vulnerabilities in modern web applications. So this is a full stack challenge, and front-end hacking is an important part of this full stack. So right now I'm gonna focus on the front end and AngularJS, which is absolutely one of the most popular client-side frameworks. Okay, so in this case, I will introduce you to the so-called template injection. I will explain to you how it works. So if you don't have some experience with AngularJS, then I will deliver this knowledge to you. And then I will show you how you can go from template injection to the so-called scope hacking. And in the next cases, I'll focus on other topics as well, of course, related to AngularJS. So template injection first. Let me go to the whiteboard and let me present the high-level overview of the problem here. In AngularJS, you can do something like this. In between double curly brackets, you can put an expression, like, for example, 4 minus 1, okay? And you can deliver something like this to the web application, and you can analyze the response. So this goes into the request, right? Or it is sent as the data in your request, and you analyze the response of the web application. If you will see in the response the same thing, so 4 minus 1, then it is okay. But when you see in the response 3, then definitely this is not okay, and it means that the so-called template injection in AngularJS is possible, okay? So, you know, from the point of view of the test scenario, this is very simple. You take a request, you put this guy as a value of a parameter. If this guy is reflected back in response, then you check if exactly the same is reflected back in response or the result of this expression, okay? Exactly the same means that it is secure, and if you see the result of this expression, like 3, then template injection is possible, and when template injection, so template injection is possible, and when template injection is possible, then you can do the so-called scope hacking, okay? And this is what I'm gonna focus in this case. So yeah, let's do this simple test in my testing environment. Let me show you that template injection indeed is possible, and then I will move to the details of this part, scope hacking, because we have to understand the scope hacking in the context of AngularJS in order to understand what we can do in terms of the attack, okay? But this is what I'm going to discuss later on. First, template injection in practice. So first, I'm going to go to my testing environment to the following location, training.local/AngularJS. So here I've got a demo, training.local AngularJS. Okay. So here it is. I've got here a search functionality. If I put here David, I'll click search. You see that there is a message, you are searching for David. So the data that I provided here, and this data is also sent in the search parameter here, is reflected back in response exactly here, right? Now, instead of David, I will put some expression in between double curly brackets. And yeah, let me click search. What I see in response is free. You are searching for free. So it clearly shows that, well, this expression in between double curly brackets has been evaluated, and I see the result of this expression. So template injection is possible. I did a completely, let's say, black box testing. I could go to the source code right now. I could show you that indeed I'm using AngularJS, but you can just provide a payload like this, and when this is evaluated, then it means that, well, it was evaluated by AngularJS, because this structure like double curly brackets and expression inside, this is specific to AngularJS. Okay. Okay. So far so good. Now, what we can do as attackers, we always have to present some exploitation scenario, right? So when we've got template injection, then we can go to the so-called scope hacking. And now I'm gonna tell you what scope hacking is. When we think about cross-site scripting, then the scope is limited to the so-called same origin policy, which is domain, port, and protocol, right? So our malicious script is limited by the domain, port, protocol. In AngularJS, the scope of my activity, let's say, or the scope of the activity of my exploit is limited by $scope. You will see in a minute this guy in the DevTools, because I will go into the details. And you can very easily check in the DevTools what is in the scope in the context of your template injection, okay? And this is what I'm going to present to you right now. So I'm going to open DevTools. So my injection point is here, this free, right? Because this is 4-1 is free. Here is my template injection. This is my context. Now, if I click right and inspect element, and I will go to the console, then I can, in the console, do something like this. Angular.element $0.scope. Let me hit enter. Let me expand it. And here is my scope. Maybe this is a little bit magical for you right now, so let me explain it to you. I highlighted free because this is my injection point. And I provided in the console of the DevTools angular.element $0.scope. $0 is the reference to the highlighted injection point. So the reference to this free, right? Because there is my injection point. .scope, it just presents what is in the scope of this injection, right? We've got, of course, template injection. So this is how you can learn what you can do as an attacker, because you are limited by the scope, okay? So I hope that you are following with me. And you have to really clearly understand this scope hacking in AngularJS, because you are actually limited to the things that you can see here. You cannot do arbitrary things like, for example, in XSS, as I already told you, you are limited by domain port protocol. So you've got a lot of possibilities to do nasty things. In AngularJS, it works differently. You are limited by the so-called scope, and you have to first see what is accessible in the scope from the point of view of your template injection in your specific point where the template injection exists, okay? Okay, so far so good. Now we are going to talk about scope hacking, because you are limited by functions and variables that are in the scope. And these functions and variables are presented here. That's why I provided AngularJS element $0.scope in the console. So now my job as a bug hunter is to go through this scope and see what is interesting out there. What is interesting, I mean, what I can potentially steal as a result of a template injection, okay? So what I can, in other words, what I can do as a result of scope hacking. Let's take a look at this guy. There is anti-CSRF token in the scope. So I can access this data, and I'm going to just steal this data because this is in the scope. But, it's not so fast. I can access this data, but, I need a way of sending this data out to the attacker's controlled domain. So now I know that there is interesting sensitive data like anti-CSRF token in the scope. I can read it, but the question is how to fetch it, how to extract it to the attacker's domain. And I need to find some functions in the scope, and I need to find out whether I can use these functions from the scope to extract this data. There is no other way, right? So I need to just analyze the source code actually of every single function from the scope in order to determine whether I can steal the data or not by using a given function. So what functions do we have here? For example, we've got a function load comments, because I've got some discussion board here. So I've got a function like load comments. And now I want to find out if I can somehow use this function to steal this data. So let's do it. Let's go to debugger. Let's try to find the source code of this function. It was load comments, right? Here is the function, load comments. And let's read the source code of this function and try to determine if we can use this function to steal the anti-CSRF token. And before I read the source code of this function, I want to emphasize one thing. We are talking about front-end hacking, so you can read the source code, right? This is not a server-side code. This is the client-side code, so you can read it and you can go step by step from the very beginning till the very end, and the very end is an interesting attack, right? Okay, so you see that indeed the load comments is in the scope. You see $scope.load comments, and this function is used to load the comments because there is this discussion board functionality in this web application. And as you can see, on default, there is an empty API base URL parameter in this function. So please take a look here. The API base URL is empty, and then the request is sent to API base URL concatenated with API/comments.php. So on default, API base URL is empty, so we are going to fetch the comments from API/comments.php. But what I can do as a hacker right now, I can specify the value of API-based URL. Then, well, it will be the external domain or the attacker's domain. This domain will be concatenated with API/comments.php, but it will allow me to send the data to the domain I control, okay? So as a value of API-based URL, I will provide the attacker's domain, and this way the request in this line, in the line number 62, the HTTP request will be sent to the domain that I control, okay? And why can I do it? Because I can do hacking as long as I'm using variables and functions from the scope in the context of my template injection point, okay? So I can do it because this function is in the scope. Okay, so far so good. Let me now close it and let me show you actually how the proof of concept or the attack, how it works. By the way, I've got it here, so I will copy this guy. I will copy this guy here to the search, and I will explain it to you. So in between the double curly brackets, I will provide load comments function. I can do it because this is in the scope of my injection point. Now, I will specify as a value of API-based URL, I will specify this guy. So this is the attacker's domain, right? You can see the attacker's domain out there. And I got also a plus and anti-CSRF. This is how this scope variable is named. You remember when I presented to you the scope variables and functions, the anti-CSRF token is actually stored in the variable named anti-CSRF, and this is of course the scope variable. So I'm using load comments scope function and scope variable anti-CSRF in between double curly brackets, and this way I can steal the anti-CSRF token of the user and I can send it to the attacker domain. Let me show you that indeed it works, but before I launch this attack, I will open the network tab in the DevTools, because I want you to see this attack in action, let's say, right? I want you to see that indeed I am able to steal this sensitive data as a result of AngularJS template injection attack, okay? So now let me hit search, and here is my network traffic. Please notice that my payload is sent here in the URL. Actually, this payload is sent as a value of the search parameter. So this is how I deliver this payload to the web application. And now please take a look here. I've got an outgoing request to attacker.local. Let me click this guy and let me show the details of this request. Let me make it a little bit bigger. So you see that my browser sent the request to attacker.local log PHP x =, and here I've got the value of my anti-CSRF token, right? Here's the value of my anti-CSRF token. And now if you wonder why I've got here API/comments PHP, do you remember the source code of the function load comments? API/comments PHP is appended to API-based URL. There is some concatenation in the source code. So the API-based URL that I specified, so this is my my domain, the attacker's domain, is concatenated with API/comments.php. And that's the reason why this guy is appended to this URL. But this is not a problem. Still, the request goes out to the attacker domain together with the value of anti-CSRF token, and it was my goal. Now, just to show you so that you are 100% sure that this request has been sent as a result of our attack, please take a look at the refer header, training.local/AngularJS, right? And now please go to the URL bar in the browser. You see training.local/AngularJS. This is where my demo is hosted. So you clearly see where this attack originated from. It originated from training.local/AngularJS, and indeed the sensitive data is sent out to attacker.local. Very nice, very beautiful, and this is how it works. So in this case, you learned about AngularJS template injection, how it works in practice, how to figure out whether AngularJS template injection is possible or not in the web application. So very simple test scenario. And then I presented to you how to go from template injection to the so-called scope hacking. And in the scope hacking, I identified a function that I could use to steal sensitive data from the scope. In other words, sensitive data in the scope, anti-CSRF token, I need another function from the scope to steal sensitive data from the scope. So this is how it works. And let me now go to the slides so that it is even more clear for you. So let me wrap up everything. So first I started with template injection. In my example, I used 4-1, but you can put whatever you want. Arbitrary expression like, for example, 33-11. Why not? I told you that the attacker is limited to scope functions and variables. So first, identify if template injection is possible. Then, if it is possible, put something like this Angular element $0.scope in the DevTools. Keep in mind that first you have to highlight the injection point because $0 actually stores the reference to your injection point. Then I noticed that load comments and anti-CSRF are in scope. And well, here is actually the payload that I used to steal the anti-CSRF token from this vulnerable application. So this is it. I hope that this is clear for you. We just started the journey with AngularJS hacking, and in the upcoming cases, I will show you more powerful attacks in AngularJS. So this is it for this case, and let's jump to the next case right now.